For a place like yours, it's pretty nice. I guess I could live here with you." The one who blurted this out at the front door was the mother of my ex-husband, whom I thought I had long parted ways with. While my mother-in-law acted all smiles, she ignored my poor condition and would exploit me for cooking and cleaning, a true narcissist at heart. Her son, my ex, raised by her, also thought the world revolved around him. I couldn't bear it and chose to divorce. Why are these two right in front of me even though I moved to a place they wouldn't know? And then, I was faced with a shocking truth. My name is Catherine. I joined the company fresh out of college and worked hard in the sales department for 6 years. Recently, I've become something of a career woman, being entrusted with leading projects. Because I was so engrossed in my work, my salary had steadily increased. I found joy in performing well and getting recognition, and since I had no interest in splurging on shopping or luxurious trips, my savings just kept growing. I had plenty of security for the future and was leading a fulfilling life until a certain encounter changed me. I attended a high school reunion and reconnected with a man named Bob. We didn't talk much in our student days, but that day, maybe because our companies did business with each other, our conversation strangely began. Bob worked in legal affairs at a well-known company. Our chat shifted from work to mentoring juniors, and then about our own lives, and we quickly became close, even promising to meet again after the reunion. Soon, we began dating and decided to get married within a year. However, after a modest wedding ceremony at a chapel, surrounded by family and friends, I was about to discover a shocking fact. One day, I fell sick. While Bob was concerned for me as I lay bedridden, soon enough, his mother called. "Hello, Mom." "No, it's all right. Just that Catherine isn't feeling too well." I could overhear the conversation between Bob and his mother from the corridor, but soon felt an odd discomfort. Seems like his mother was calling before she intended to visit. Of course, I thought he'd decline. I wasn't bedridden, but naturally, I wanted some rest without any disturbances. However, Bob complied with his mother's wishes and accepted her visit. "All right, we'll be waiting. I'll wake Catherine up." Hearing this, I was baffled. Why would he allow her to come over knowing I'm unwell? And even mentioning waking me up? Lost in my astonishment and confusion, Bob returned looking like it was the most normal thing to do. "Mom's in the neighborhood and wants to stop by. She says it's just for a short while." I felt bad turning her away. "So, Catherine, wake up. Just showing your face will be enough." Of course, it'd be inappropriate for his mother to come over while his wife was in bed. My living room wasn't even cleaned yet, and dishes were still in the sink. Despite showing concern, Bob hadn't lifted a finger to help. Pushing through my discomfort, I hurriedly cleaned up and got dressed before his mother's arrival. Throughout, Bob didn't offer any assistance or even look remotely apologetic. When his mother arrived, I was made to serve tea and set the table, with no consideration for my health. Their conversation was odd, too. They chatted amongst themselves, leaving me feeling isolated while suppressing a headache and chills. Eventually, his mother stayed until dinner. I kept my frustration hidden, cooked the meal, and finally collapsed into bed once she left. Bob has always prioritized his mother. He'd say he felt bad because they lived apart and often brought her gifts or frequently visited her place. I thought it was just him being a good son, but over time, I realized he always put his mother first. This behavior intensified, and just 6 months into our marriage, he completely disregarded me, always considering his mother as his top priority. Bob was, in essence, a mama's boy. Comparing our cooking, always visiting her house during outings, and his mother always indulging this behavior, clearly smitten by her son. I had planned to build a happy married life, but before I knew it, my mother-in-law's shadow was constantly between us. There's a reason she's so indulgent with her son, Bob. It's her spending habits. It wasn't just limited to coffee dates with friends or outings. but also expensive hobbies like traveling and purchasing limited edition luxury brands. Because of this, she often approached Bob asking for money. This behavior shamelessly extended to me as well. I was taken aback by such demands, something I never faced even from my own parents. Having been strictly taught by my parents against borrowing money, I was deeply shocked by my mother-in-law's attitude of taking it for granted. I never gave her a dime, but every time she asked, Bob would hand it over. Perhaps that's why she doted on her sons so much. It's only natural to help out when mom's in trouble, right? That was all Bob had to say, even when I brought up the issue. Before I knew it, money exchanges were happening behind my back, and unknowingly our finances became tight. It reached a point where I pleaded, "I won't blame you anymore, but at least don't hide it from me." When I visited my in-laws, to my mother-in-law, I was just a free housemaid. She took advantage of me, cleaning, cooking, even tending to the garden and cleaning windows. Still, I had to oblige for Bob's sake. It seemed like, somewhere deep down, she enjoyed bossing me around. Unaware of these circumstances, Bob never stepped in to help. Instead, he genuinely believed his mother's treatment was making me a better wife. When I stood up to my mother-in-law, Bob, trying to mediate, said something unbelievable. "It seems Catherine's mom couldn't look after her much, so she's just embarrassed now, feeling like she has a real mother for the first time." True, my parents ran an old-fashioned diner and were busy working every day. But I don't hold any resentment towards my mother. Usually, they could have asked their only daughter to help with serving customers, but instead, they let me go out and have fun, taking up hobbies and lessons. A mantra my parents always had was, "Children aren't just tools for free labor." This was in stark contrast to my mother-in-law. I finally confronted my husband. I was defending not only myself but also my parents, who had shed tears of joy at our wedding. "What your mom's doing isn't right. Just because I'm the daughter-in-law doesn't mean she can boss me around. And I don't want to constantly maintain your family home to perfection. I just want her to leave me alone." But the response I got from my husband was filled with anger. "How can you say such awful things about my mom? Thanks to her, you're being a proper wife. Don't make trouble without being grateful." Furthermore, he threatened with, "If you keep talking like this, I'll divorce you." He thrust a divorce attorney's business card at me. "How about that? I'm dead serious. If you apologize to both me and my mom, we can discuss things." He had deeply rooted old-fashioned values. In his eyes, a wife was inferior to both the husband and mother-in-law, and she should obey them in everything. Since I resisted this notion, he became confused and furious. He probably thought threatening divorce would make me cry and apologize. But I was convinced that our marriage wasn't happy anymore and that things wouldn't improve. My husband said, "Think things over while I'm on my business trip," and left the next day. Seeing this as a golden opportunity, I immediately headed to a divorce attorney's office. I rushed into the firm and quickly took care of the necessary procedures. While it required various formalities to revert to my maiden name, I took some days off and tried to get everything done while he was away. The notification of our divorce being finalized and my husband's return almost coincided. "You went that far out of stubbornness? Filing for divorce isn't something you do lightly. This is going too far, just to upset us." In his mind, I was a capricious woman acting out of a little rebellious spirit. I decided to play along with his perception and feigned indignation. "After all, you've been ignoring me, just having fun with your mom. I'm fed up with always being sidelined. Why am I always left out?" My exaggerated sulking hit the mark with him. He's the kind of man who loved when women showed such dependent attitudes towards him. Perhaps my act was convincing, or maybe he just wanted to believe it, but he was completely taken in. He became more accommodating, quickly agreeing to favorable terms regarding the division of our assets. He thought he'd humor my stubbornness until I was satisfied. He believed that once I felt better, we could remarry and resume our old life. But I no longer had feelings for him. I had divorced him to prioritize myself, so there was no way I'd go back to living with him. After completing all the troublesome procedures for the division of assets, I began looking for a new place to live. I fell in love with a convenient high-rise apartment near my workplace and decided to buy it on a whim. I hoped this new home would mark a fresh start in my life. While I enjoyed my days working and living at my own pace, one day, out of the blue, my ex-husband and mother-in-law came to visit. I hadn't given them my address. My mother-in-law made a scene in the building's entrance, continuously calling out my name. Not wanting to inconvenience my neighbors, I reluctantly welcomed them at my door. "Why here?" "Oh, it's a private investigator. I was worried about how you were doing, and Mom suggested we should check up on you," my ex-husband replied nonchalantly. Even though our legal ties had been severed, I was chilled to the bone knowing he'd gone to the lengths of hiring a detective without my knowledge. Stunned, I only thought about how to get them out, while my former mother-in-law, despite her age, acted carefree and childish. She tried peering into my house, bending over to see inside and just doing as she pleased. Just as I was about to reprimand her, she blurted out, "Your place isn't as shabby as I thought. It's quite nice. I could even live here with you." Excuse me? Flabbergasted, my mind went blank. I hadn't expected her to suggest living together, and her smile was downright eerie. I couldn't understand why she'd make such a proposal and pondered my next move. My ex-husband, grinning, agreed with her. "You must be lonely living here all by herself. That's why I brought Mom along today. Let's let bygones be bygones, okay?" He continued making decisions without my input. And it was clear from their actions that they both disregarded my wishes. "Absolutely not. Please leave. I don't need your forgiveness. Please, never come back." Having expected me to readily agree, my ex-husband was stunned. "What? Why? Are you serious? Why are you saying this? Bob came here for you." They were clearly surprised by my refusal. In my ex-husband's mind, I was still the stubborn wife trying to give them a hard time. He began to act arrogantly, as if he was the one bending over backward, doing me a favor by forgiving me. "You're gonna regret being lonely without us, you know?" "That's fine. Please leave. You're not welcome here, and I'm done with both of you." His perception was warped solely by his own needs, and he had no intention of understanding my perspective. Even when I made my refusal clear, he still believed I was just being stubborn. Laughing off my words, he tried to push past me into the house. Being a man, he easily overpowered me, and I ended up stumbling and falling in the hallway. "Ah!" A surprised shout escaped me, and shortly after, my neighbor's door opened. My ex-husband, trying to rush inside, bumped into me. The puzzled neighbor, seeing my distress, promptly went to call for help after I begged. "Please, call the police." "Hey! What the hell are you saying?" In my eyes, this was trespassing. When I also called the police and they found out they'd received 2 calls about the same incident, they quickly dispatched a patrol car. My neighbor, trying to protect me, let me in and locked the door. Outside, my ex-husband and his mother began pounding on the door, shouting their grievances loudly. "It's a misunderstanding. I'm her husband. We just came to visit. Hey, don't touch my mom. Catherine, please, tell them. It's your fault for not giving us your address. You. Not only have you tarnished Bob's reputation, but now you're doing this to me? Come out and apologize." His yelling was incredibly loud. Since it was a holiday and many of the neighbors were home, it drew quite a crowd, turning into quite the spectacle. Luckily, even though I was new to the apartment complex, I'd been actively involved in community gatherings and was well liked for being helpful. Even with the disturbance caused by my ex-husband's unexpected appearance, the neighbors were sympathetic and understanding. With testimonies from me, my neighbor, and other residents, my ex-husband and his mother were taken into custody for trespassing. Despite the inconvenience, my neighbor mentioned working in the legal field and even introduced me to a lawyer who specialized in stalking. Come to think of it, my ex-husband worked in legal affairs too, but seemed entirely oblivious to the laws he was breaking. He probably still is. Then, unexpectedly, my suspicion was confirmed in the most unforeseen way. It all started with a call from a mutual female friend, someone both my ex-husband, Bob, and I knew from high school. She mentioned having seen Bob walking closely with a young child. It hadn't even been several months since that unannounced visit of his. Could it be that Bob, who had hoped to reconcile with me, already had a new lover? If so, that's his business and none of mine. But, would his mother approve of him dating a woman who was divorced and had a child? Having already consulted a lawyer about Bob, I decided to hire an investigator. A reputable detective agency, hired through my lawyer's firm, started looking into him. And the findings were shocking. Bob had been having an affair even before our divorce. Even though I had long moved on from him, the sense of betrayal was profound. It felt as if the rug had been pulled out from under me multiple times. In Bob's mind, his world is distorted to fit his needs. He seems to place his mother at the top, with women, including me, ranked below, as lesser beings to ridicule and belittle. Including me, he seemed to think it was fine to mock and belittle any woman, considering them inferior beings. Given such hierarchical thinking, I could somehow make sense of his erratic actions. Having a wife while cheating, presuming it's natural to get back with an estranged wife, and all the while maintaining a relationship with his mistress, to Bob, all this seemed perfectly logical. With disbelief, I continued reading the investigator's report. Apparently, even though he had no intention of marrying her, he had hinted at a future to the woman he was cheating with. He gave her hope to keep their relationship alive. And my worst fear was confirmed. The young child he was seen walking with was, in fact, the child of his affair. He had been leading a double life. And the child was born around the same time as our marriage. The complexity of the situation made me nauseous. I was furious, so I sent a letter to his mistress, telling her everything. When she found out about everything, she was livid. She was enraged that while hinting at marrying her, he hadn't given up on reconciling with me, and she accused him of marriage fraud. But just hinting at marriage isn't grounds for a case. I thought she'd probably let it slide, but then it was discovered that Bob had taken a substantial amount of money from her under the guise of wedding expenses. And the money? It went to his mother. Her extravagant tastes knew no bounds, and her demands only escalated. To appease his angered mother after our altercation, Bob had booked an expensive suite on a cruise ship and planned an overseas trip. The money was intended for that purpose. Bob's mistress seized this opportunity and managed to press charges. My ex-husband faced claims for division of property from me, child support payments for the child he had with his mistress, and was charged with fraud. His savings quickly depleted. He had been frequently mooching off his mother anyway, so he didn't have much saved up. Their impressive family home was foreclosed on, yet the debts kept piling up. I had settled the matter of property division, so I had severed ties with my ex-husband. However, the situation with him and his mistress was a different story. They did have a young child together, after all. He quickly fell behind on child support, and his mistress was furious. His misdeeds were all exposed at his workplace after she stormed in, shouting at him. Despite working in the legal field, he had had frequent troubles with women and was in the middle of a trial for fraud. Naturally, he had kept all this hidden from his employer. His shady dealings became well known, and his reputation at the company plummeted. He was moved off the projects he had been handling, sidelined to insignificant roles, and the bad rumors never stopped. He couldn't handle the situation and resigned. When he tried to find another job, his fraud charges were already well known in his industry, making it hard for him to find a position. The mistress didn't let him forget about his criminal record, and once he realized he couldn't be picky about work, he ended up juggling multiple demanding physical labor jobs, day and night. just to keep up with the child support payments. Furthermore, his mother disappeared, pushing him to the brink of despair. Once she saw her son being sued, quitting his job, and drowning in debt, she swiftly disappeared, not wanting to get involved. However, she couldn't curb her own extravagant spending habits and ended up accumulating a lot of debt herself. With no son left to mooch off of, she continued her lavish lifestyle of buying high-end brand goods and indulging in luxurious meals, further deepening her debt. My ex lived a lonely life in a cramped apartment where he could hear his neighbors' voices distinctly. To make matters worse, a couple with a volatile temper recently moved in next door, frequently erupting in loud arguments. As for me, I continued to work hard in my role as a sales representative. I've taken on many new projects, achieving groundbreaking results time and time again. Having more time for myself now, I've also increased my study hours, expanding my expertise. Thanks to my specialized knowledge, I've gained the trust of my clients, and the company's revenue has surged. Not only am I viewed as a potential female executive, but there are even higher positions that I am considered for. Of course, I plan to work hard and contribute to the company. After all, it's my life. I should spend it doing what I love, living proudly and confidently.